All right, hello there, thrill seekers. And today's Friday flashback is from the year 2016 in Benediktushof, which is a retreat center in Bavaria in Germany, where I do retreats every year. And I am talking about the origins and the origins of Buddhism and what I think Buddhism is ultimately. I'm trying to let you see Ziggy in the shot here. Anyway, there's Ziggy. Oh, no, there's Ziggy. So it's related to the stuff I've been talking about all week on this channel, and I serendipitously, I don't know if I'm even using that word right, found this clip. Was the second thing I clicked on to see if it was going to be useful, and it happens to be something where I'm talking about exactly what I've been talking about all week. So I thought I would share it with you. So let's see how I explained Buddhism in 2016 in Benediktushof in Germany. This is my final retreat in this tour of Europe. And I've been kind of giving one lecture again and again at various places because I've been thinking about what this whole Buddhism thing is. And I feel like this understanding that I have, I don't know if it's the best understanding, but I feel that it's a different way of explaining it from the ways that I've seen other people explain Buddhism. Whenever I see how people explain Buddhism. So maybe that's one way of saying I think everybody else has it wrong. I don't know if they have it wrong, though. I think maybe sometimes people understand this, but then feel like it's so obvious they don't need to say it. So maybe that's why a lot of people don't say this. But let me try to explain. I feel like if you look at the history of Buddhism, what happened is you had Buddha, Gautama Buddha, and probably most of you know the story of Buddha's life, but I'll give you the short version. He was a prince in India 2,500 years ago, and he had a very good life as a prince, a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of comfort, pleasure. But he found that that wasn't satisfactory, so he left and he began to study meditation. And he learned several different forms of meditation from different teachers. Some of these styles of meditation are still taught today as being the ultimate answer to everything. But he found that these kind of meditations they led to a kind of insight. But insight isn't what he was looking for. He was looking for something deeper than just merely understanding. So he went on this, what they call ascetic quest, where Indian philosophy at the time, the most popular version, said that the mind and body were two separate things, and the way to free the mind or the soul was to kind of destroy the body. So they would starve themselves and live in these terrible, painful conditions and anything to weaken the body so as to free the mind or free the soul, the spirit. Atman is what they called it. This didn't work for Buddha either. He spent 6 years doing it. So he didn't just try a little bit and give up. He spent 6 years working on this. But at the end of 6 years, he was no closer to discovering the truth or the thing that he wanted to discover, but he was almost dead. So the story goes, he accepted a bowl of rice milk from a girl who was giving it to an offering to a god. He took the rice milk and became stronger, and he decided to do this. He thought about the different times in his life and different experiences he had, and he remembered a time when he was a child and he was looking at the fields that his father's servants were plowing, and he felt very calm and very balanced at that moment. So he decided to make that his practice, this very simple thing of just sitting. And we don't know if he sat like this or what, but he sat on a stone and just tried to quietly observe his life as it really was. And this led to the understanding that he was seeking. But once he had that, he thought, this is completely different from all of these meditation things I've been doing. It's completely different from this idea of the soul is separate from the body and trying to free the soul from the body. He thought, no one will understand this. So at first he just decided, great, this is fine. I'm not going to try to teach it. And the story goes, and of course this is a legend, but it's the way the legend is told, that the god Indra came from Indra heaven, or wherever Indra lives, and said, hey Buddha, you've got to teach this to the people. And he decided to try to teach it. And so he had 5 traveling companions when he was doing this painful process of starving himself and so forth. And he went to them and he started to teach them this practice that he'd learned. And they appreciated it, and they began to practice what he practiced, and soon a lot of people were practicing it. So to me, the great innovation is not necessarily the practice. I suppose the practice that Buddha did is kind of a great innovation, because it was directionless. There was no, he wasn't trying to transform this into something else. He was trying to see exactly what this life really was without finding something other than that. So that was one thing. But the other thing was he decided to teach it, and that's why we have Buddhism. And it's developed along the lines of trying to find a way to teach this practice to other people. The other story, which I think is significant, is the story of Bodhidharma. And one of the places where I spoke about this, they just happen to have a picture of Bodhidharma on the wall, which we don't have here. It would be good if I could show you. Sometimes you see Bodhidharma in Zen temples, and there's probably somewhere around, there's a lot of Buddhist art in this place, there's probably some picture of Bodhidharma. But he's always this very angry looking guy. He's got this scowling face, and he's got a beard. He's usually got a red beard, and he just looks angry and pissed off, And the story of Bodhidharma, there's various versions of the story of Bodhidharma. I told this same story at a Kung Fu studio, and they have a different version of the Bodhidharma story. The version of the Bodhidharma story that I like, though, that I think is significant for Zen, is that he was a man from India who traveled north into what we now know as China to try to find a place where he could meditate. And he found a cave in a mountain somewhere. And the story goes that he sat in that cave staring at the wall of the cave for 9 years. And the reason we sit facing the wall is because of Bodhidharma. So he sat there for 9 years. I'm sure he got up sometimes to go get food and to use the toilet or whatever, but he basically meditated for 9 years facing this wall. And by himself. And eventually people started hearing about him, and this was an unusual practice that he did, and people wanted to learn about it. But Bodhidharma just didn't want to be bothered. Eventually 4 people, 3 men and 1 woman, came and joined him in his practice. And there's various legends about how they joined him, but they all sound to me like variations on the same thing. which is Bodhidharma is sitting there in his cave and he's happy to be alone, or maybe not happy, but he just wants to be alone. And somebody comes and says, "Hey, Bodhidharma, can I practice with you?" And he's kind of like, "All right, sit over there. Don't bother me. We'll sit together." And then another person comes and he's like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, another one. All right, you sit over there. Be quiet like he is. We'll just sit together." And pretty soon he's got 4 people. So there's 5 people sitting in this cave, joining Bodhidharma in this practice that is basically his practice that he's doing alone. And I think this is, to me, the model of what a Zen retreat is. So it's not that you come here and I'm here as the teacher to teach you something. I'm doing this retreat too, and I'm kind of acting the role of Bodhidharma. So, and you're acting the role of the 4 people who came to bother him. I know that I don't actually consider that you guys to be bothering me, but if you think of it that way, I think it makes the retreat make more sense. So when we do ceremonies and things, probably these ceremonies originated probably in the original group of Buddha's followers. So what happened when Buddha died was that they wanted to try to preserve his teachings. But they didn't want to write them down. And this part always seems slightly strange to me, because it wasn't as if there was no writing at the time. Like the written word existed in India for thousands of years before Buddha lived. So things were being written all the time, but the early Buddhists, for whatever reason, didn't believe that writing was the best way to preserve what they had learned from Buddha. So they got together in groups and tried to memorize or tried to recall what Buddha had taught, and they worked it out into a fixed form which could be repeated. Right? So groups of them got together and tried to remember what he'd said, and they kind of worked it out. And the way they preserved it was by reciting it. So apparently different groups of monks were assigned to recite different parts of the teachings and memorize them. And they would all get together sometimes as a group and speak them out. So what we're doing when we do that kanji, zaibo, satsugyojin, hanya, hara, mitaji, is kind of an imitation of what they did. So we can imagine that in Bodhidharma's cave, we don't know, but maybe one of the practices Bodhidharma did was to recite those scriptures, or those teachings, and maybe his 4 people got together and did that together. So they were just kind of following him, but everyone's practice is their own practice. This is to me the key point. So it's not as if we're trying to teach something in the way that we usually teach things. Usually teach by, I don't know how you usually teach something. You show somebody what to do. The way I always think of it is I play guitar and bass, and I haven't really had guitar and bass students, but I've learned from other people. And when I've learned from other people, I'll give you an example. When I was a teenager, my friend Dave Chamberlain was a really terrific guitar player, really, really good. But most of the music that Dave liked, I kind of didn't like very much. He was into this kind of heavy metal, which I could deal with the heavy metal stuff, but he would also play this kind of top 40 rock stuff, this kind of popular rock music stuff. which I had no use for, but I could see that he was a great guitar player. So he had a band, and I used to follow his band around, and I would help them move equipment and run the lighting and stuff like that sometimes. But the reason I did it wasn't because I'm a great person and I want to help them out so much as I want to stand in front and watch what Dave does, you know, because I could watch what he played and go, oh, that's how you do that little thing. And so when I would come back home, remembering what I saw Dave do, I could learn it. But I wasn't trying to learn the songs he played. I was trying to learn how he played guitar so that I could do my own songs, right? Because I knew if I could pick up these things, I could put them together in a new way and make something else out of it. So what developed, even though most of my study of guitar was watching my friend Dave Chamberlain play, I don't play anything like the way Dave plays. By the way, if anybody remembers the band Warrant, I don't know if anybody remembers. Maybe they were nothing in Germany. Late 1980s, early 1990s metal band. They had a song called "She's My Cherry Pie." Anyway, the drummer for Warrant was Dave's brother, Steve. Dave, unfortunately, never really got successful as a musician, although he makes a living as a producer and things like that now in California. But he never became famous. His brother kind of became famous as the drummer for Warrant. But so that's what I think this is. So if I'm doing something, I'm doing this meditation practice and kind of demonstrating it and teaching it. But it's not so that everybody in this room can become like me, because that would be a disaster. You know, you don't want to do that. I don't advise it, I don't recommend it. Please don't become like me. And I'm not trying to teach you some sort of knowledge. You know, I might, when I do these talks for the next few days, I'll probably come up with little bits of history and things that might be interesting. But the main thing I'm trying to give is a way of an attitude. Would be the best English word I can come up with. An attitude meaning, the word attitude actually originally means like the position of a thing. You know, they still use it in do they use it in? They still use it in some kind in science sometimes. I think the attitude of the instrument or something. It just means the way it's placed so that it does its thing. So this attitude is different from this attitude, and you know, things like that. So it's a way of looking at things that you can take and make into your own way of looking at things. And so each of our practices is our own individual way of looking at